Friends, it is Friday. It is February 11th, and we are here with our incredible friend, Mark Hanson. And I'm just checking something here real quick. But, oh, there we go. Okay. We're going to see your chat coming up. So let us know where you're coming in from. And if you have specific questions, Michelle, we see you. But if you have specific questions for Mark as we go, we'll have a little bit of time, hopefully, to ask him things that you are thinking about. But Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Jed. Thank you for having me on this. I got to say, it's a first for me. So, uh,
Well, it's great to have you.
oh, thank you. I appreciate it very much. Jed and I met probably 6, 7 years ago now, maybe 6 years ago
Yeah.
in Indiana. And I've watched you go explode acrylic like a boss and now the acrylic university. So it's been fun to watch. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Well, yeah, we were at do you remember the name of that whatever that thing's called
Oh, the
in Indiana?
Hoosier Salon.
Yeah, the Hoosier
Right.
Salon hosts this event called First Brush of Spring,
Right.
and Mark
Did
was
you?
one of the kind of rock star instructors who is there that they bring people in from all over, and so I was getting to know Mark a little bit there, and one of the things that stood out to me is he was one of the instructors that worked in acrylics. Not all the time, because Mark is a very versatile artist and works in lots of stuff, but that was really cool. We had some good conversations, and some of it was about acrylics. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
where
it
do you
was
live
fun.
now?
What's that?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was more like a wide-eyed, I don't know where I am kind of an instructor, but it was a lot of fun. That's a great organization if people ever want to go take a workshop there. If they're still doing them, I assume they are.
They
But
are. They
really a
are
nice
still doing
place to
them.
paint and visit for a while.
Was that your only time there?
I went 2 years,
Okay.
and I think I got rained out every year, and uh, and then COVID hit, so I've been back.
It's kind of a tricky time of year because it's first brush of spring, and sometimes you get, really great weather all the way through, and then sometimes you get these days that downpour. And,
Yeah,
you know,
I
yeah,
think the second year, Roger Dale Brown and I were both teaching plein air, and I don't think they ever went outside. We kept finding shelters to paint under because it just poured the whole time, but it was still fun.
they've been smart over the years to build, some of those places that are actually, like I know of one. I'm thinking of one in particular. There's kind of a park and they have like a 2 or 3 story building, like it's like a gazebo with a
Uh
roof,
huh.
but it's got a deck and a lower deck so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you can paint outside. Well, it's great to reconnect. Mark and I have been chatting for a little while here before we got started, and so really looking forward to this. And you guys, make sure Mark. Can you tell us what is like the your website? Can you give me the exact address so I can type it in here for our people so they can check out your website?
Sure. It's www.markhansonart.com.
That's what I thought it was, but I didn't have it written out already. So you guys got to go there. And do you have one for your studio there?
Yeah, we have one called Salt Marsh Studio. Let's see, what is it? Uh, I think it's just saltmarshstudios.com.
Okay,
So I will say we're not real active with it. We started up when we were doing a painting project for a month, and but we try to keep up with the others, but not too much with all of them.
totally. It's a lot to do.
Yeah,
There's so much to do as an artist when you're making your living as an artist, and you're doing a great job though. So where are you exactly? Because um, you're somewhere cool.
oh, thanks. Yeah, I've well, I mean, I've spent my life wandering around, being the son of an Air Force officer. So, but I did settle down for quite a while in Minnesota, and then I left Minnesota for Colorado for a while, a few years, and then Mississippi for a few years. But now I'm in outside of Savannah, Georgia, and right now I'm on an island called Whitmarsh Island, which is where our studio is. And the next island over is Wilmington, and then Tybee is where we live. So if you've never been down here, these islands, like I expected to be big, huge waterways in between masses of land. It's marsh and then island, marsh island. So if the tide's up, you might see water, but otherwise you might just be going over bridges that are over marsh grass. So, but that's the system down here of all the coastal islands.
That's so cool. I totally want to look it up more. So you're saying there's a whole stretch of islands kind of right there.
There are, oh, I'm going to forget the number, but I think there are 13 or so coastal barrier islands along the coast of Georgia. And so we're the most northern one. Like the Tybee Island borders the Savannah River, and that's the border between South Carolina and Georgia. So, and
Okay.
Tybee Island is the farthest one out. So we're right up against the Atlantic Ocean on one side. And the
Wow.
back side of the island is up against coastal salt marshes and coastal salt creeks and that sort of thing. So, and that's the system down. Just it's like living in South Dakota with the prairie, but it's all salt marsh. It's just that kind of expanse.
Here's another Air
So,
Force brat. Do you see
who's
that?
that?
I,
Oh yeah.
I I think I can't remember exactly, but this is what's great, Mark, is with Acrylic University. See this? Hi from Norway.
Oh,
I
there we go.
mean, so many
Good
amazing
morning.
people that we have in our community from all over, and
Wow.
yeah, really, really, really cool. So it's fun to every once in a while I just like to see like, oh look, somebody from Colorado. Maybe you guys were neighbors when you lived in Colorado. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Um, but let's see. I see your credentials are so long. Look at this. Somebody's looking at your website. You must be on your second or third life.
Maybe I'll get one right. I don't know. Not
Well,
sure.
that's the thing is that I say, man, when I look at Mark's his work and I think about how versatile he is, I was saying the same thing to him. I feel like he's like an artist from the masters, who can do all sorts of different things. And I feel like some of us are like one trick ponies. I'm like, this is what I do, and I don't ever deal with anything else. And Mark is
Well,
kind of like, well, put anything in his hand and he can do a great job with it. So
yeah, I appreciate that, but honestly, it's just I'm getting older, so that's why all this stuff is going on behind me. But I went to an art school. I went to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, and I really never painted with oils at Art Center except for two classes. Dan McCaw had a class, and Harry Carmine had a figure painting class. Otherwise, the only thing we ever painted with was everything else. They trained us as an illustration major, so they trained us in gouache and casein and scratch board and ink and whatever, dyes and watercolor. So really, it's not anything of my doing. It's just what they made us use through all these different classes. And most of it you put away, like we were talking about gouache earlier, which is a wonderful medium. But I mean, for a long time, I would get gouache out once in a while to paint with it, and I tell another artist might know what it was, and they go, "What?" You know. And now it's just it's had an explosive re-entry into the artist world.
what do you think made
Yeah.
that happen?
Oh, I think a few artists. Mike Hernandez out in I think he's in Oregon now or Washington now. Washington now.
Is he in Washington? Did
Well,
he
he was
move?
for a while. I don't know if but he was down in California. He worked with the animation industry and still
Yeah.
does, I think. And he did so much of it and he taught it. Um, there's a few of those. Most of them, surprisingly enough, most of them come out of Art Center and the film industry because that's just kind of the pablum that everybody had to work with.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting to watch, though.
It is interesting, and I agree with you. Sometimes it just takes a few people who are persistent and are good enough to like draw some attention, and it's like, oh my goodness, look at what you can do with gouache. I never even had heard of it, like you said, and then all of a sudden you're like, that's really cool. Um,
Well, and that goes with me for me with acrylics, because I remember talking to you and you were so excited about acrylics and so gung ho to make sure. I think that's when I heard you say the term acrylic like a boss, and
yeah,
to make sure that people looked at it as a medium that's just as valid as any other medium. And I've always felt that about all mediums, but a lot of places and people don't. People who work in watercolor have always had kind of a thing over their head about it, and they shouldn't have that.
I
I
know.
mean, how often I work in pastel, and how often do you guys who work in different medium get asked, do you charge the same as your oils? Well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, it's a piece of artwork. It's just as valid as no matter what the medium is, sticks or
Totally.
mud or rocks. But like talking to you, and then since too, because I had to work with acrylic in art school, but I pull it out once a year, put it away, pull it out once a year, put it away, because it would just frustrate the heck out of me. And but then seeing more and more of it, like on places like Instagram, seeing so many painters working with acrylic in so many different ways, got me even more interested in pursuing it more because of its versatility. I mean, and it's solvent free,
Yeah.
and it's fast. If I want to change something or do something, how you all know how it is. You can do it so fast.
Oh man. I think that's one of the, that's always one of the things that people talk about being a downfall is, oh, it drives so fast. But then I really do think that if you can embrace something like that, you can think of it as a strength and it can be a strength for you. So I'm totally with you on
Absolutely.
that. So can you give me, is this a correct answer? Is gouache a super opaque watercolor? Somebody asked what
Uh,
gouache was.
Basically, I mean, it has. I'm going to forget. I think it has calcium carbonate, or it's got some other materials in it to make it more body, to create more of a body to it. But it's just basically pigment. It doesn't have gum triglycinth like watercolor does. It's got something else. I think M. Graham is putting honey in it so that it doesn't dry and crack on your palette and fall off. You open your palette
Interesting.
tray up, it's all just a bunch
Yeah.
of crumbles. Um, the thing about gouache that's different now too is when I was using it in art school, for color classes and design classes and stuff, it was very fugitive. Most of the colors were very fugitive, and they've improved that tremendously. So it's not something you have to worry about as much anymore.
When you
Um,
say fugitive, what do you mean?
well, it would fade pretty fast.
Mm.
Um, like real, the alizarans and things like that would fade very fast. But they started using, talking to some of the color people, they started using ways of cooking the pigment and stuff that makes it more permanent. Some substitutions and that sort of thing.
Well,
Um,
that's interesting. I'm going to start showing some of your work. Trying to figure out how I can see some of the comments or some of the questions because I might let me just see here if I can do something real quick. Maybe I can get on here. Okay, there we go. I'll be able to see some of the comments over here now. What I want to do is we've got these questions. I see some questions coming in, and one of the first ones, I'll just ask you this right now because I think it's interesting. And if you could just take a little bit of time, and then I'm going to start the slideshow. But what do you like about the different mediums? Because you have worked in so many different ones, but just gave maybe like a quick. This is what I like about oils. This is what I like about
yeah.
acrylics. This is what I like.
Well, I'll be honest. I'm in sort of a transition myself. I mean, I've worked with oils for a long time, but I also worked with pastel for a while. Um, Oils, I think the fact that you can get yourself out of trouble in a slower way is nice.
Yeah.
Acrylic, you can get yourself in trouble and out of trouble fast, and that's what I like about acrylic. I think I'll hit on acrylic over the others. I think the thing that I like about acrylic so much is that, for one, it'll go on so many different surfaces. I mean, I'm not as limited to the kind of surfaces that I can paint on. Um, I can overpaint fast. It's got the kind of color, and I'll sidetrack a little bit. One of the people asked about, I saw one of the questions was about why does acrylic have a stigma about it, and I think because acrylic starting out was used in a very colorful, bold, sort of not quite so refined way by some artists. It was like a plastic medium, and it
Yeah.
was used that way. Um, but it's a beautifully subtle medium too, and I think that it's up to the artist, to give it the kind of sophistication that
Yeah.
it needs for people to look at it as a serious medium. And the other thing is, the first thing you give your kids when they're little to paint with, or something like acrylics or watercolor or tempera. So it's put in that world of not being serious, because you can give it to your kids. You're not going to give them your, flake white oil paint. So that's probably some of it too. But
Yeah.
like some of the things you're showing here, these are all acrylic sketches, and I think that's where I've fallen in love with it, is in plein air painting, and being able to work and on a paper sketchbook and work fast and make very, to me, accurate for what I was looking for, recordings of what I was trying to do at the time. Um, the other thing, I guess I'm hitting the pluses of acrylic versus the others. The other thing I like about acrylic versus oil is that, and I mentioned this to you, Jed, I was dealing a little bit with some issues with migraines and things from petroleum byproducts. The solvents, the mediums, like the alkyd mediums and things like that. And really, they got really bad with me. So a number of years ago, I started trying other water-based mediums, water-based oils, and the acrylics from time to time. And I've just moved more and more towards the acrylics with that. I walk in the studio and I open the palette up and it feels fresh, not like I'm in the middle of a refinery.
Yeah.
And I don't, maybe it's just from the amount of time that I've had dealing with all of it, but it's just starting to really bother me to smell that and have that around me in the studio.
And you found a good solution so that when you do use oils now, you're not dealing with that, right?
Yeah, so I keep a large container of safflower oil, and I use safflower oil, and it's like a large brush washer. I use safflower oil because it's readily available. I can go to the grocery store and buy cold press organic. You can drink it safflower oil, so it's fine for cleaning your brushes in. So I like clean the brushes in that. Then I have a small container of a citrus-based solvent called Zested. And there's Eco House is another one. Eco House Extra Mild. But
Okay.
some citrus solvents like will drive you nuts. They're like getting hit in the face with an orange. But these are very, very mild. Like unless I put my face down on the brush washer, I can't really smell it. So
That's
that
good.
that for oil paint gets me back to that thing where you can do a wash, on the canvas and not have to just use thick, heavy paint all the time.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, that's really interesting. Now, what you were saying is that you do some of these are like plein air sketches. Now, this next one I wanted to stop here for a second and talk about it because I know that tell us a little bit about this process that you're using here
Okay.
and yeah.
Well, I don't know about all you guys, but I've probably got, I don't know, 30, 40 sketchbooks with like 3 drawings in each one. And I've never been really good at keeping a sketchbook. I mean, I got to admit, I've always wanted to get to the painting or whatever. I'm really bad in that regard. But about 6 or 7 months ago or so, my partner and I decided we wanted to go out, just paint without painting for anything, you know?
Mm,
So no matter how hard I try, there's always sort of this thing in the back of your head. Is this going to be something I can take somewhere? Is this going to be something that someone will want? So I just wanted to get rid of that and clear the mind of that and simply make observations and notations for myself. So we got these sketchbooks. They're the Strathmore mixed media tone gray and tone tan sketchbooks, and it's
Mm,
like a 140-pound paper, so it's very substantial. And we just go out, and sometimes we sit down, sometimes we just stand, but sit on the back of the truck or something. And I do these little studies in acrylic, and I just found it so enjoyable to not. They're never going to come out of there. I'm never going to have to go. Okay, I'm going to have an acrylic sample. They're strictly my information, and
yeah.
they will always be my information. And it's a really freeing thing to do because you let loose of the trappings of what am I going to do with them? You know,
Mm,
how am I going to frame them? Where am I going to put them, and all that.
mm,
So I'm finding that they're becoming information for larger paintings, and I don't think they'd be as easy for me to use them in that way if I wasn't doing a lot. So I'm starting to understand what my own interpretation is. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like you do a sketch, and then so the sketches are 5.5 by 6.5 in the book. That's how big the book is. And I paint on the full page. I don't usually tape them off. Once in a while I do,
Yeah.
but I try to just paint the whole page. And then the painting that I did from that is a 48 by 60 acrylic. And, it goes through an evolution. It has changes and things, but I didn't use any other photo reference because I wanted to just use memory, use impression, and use my study because the
Wow.
study was done on site, and the study is where the most truthful idea of what that was I was looking at
Yeah.
occurred.
So that's, guys, just so you're clear, the two images here that I'm switching back and forth is this is the sketch and this is the final painting, which is 4 feet by 5 feet or something like that. Very
Yeah.
big painting out of a 5 inch, sketch. So cool. That
Yeah.
is so cool.
Well, and probably everybody kind of thinks about this. I didn't want to make a big painting of the sketch. The big painting comes from all that stored experience and memory and all those things that we use to make paintings. So the sketch was the reminder, and then you have to use all that other information that you have. I mean, I drive by the marsh all day long, several times a day, and I keep looking, and I keep, how you do. You keep plugging in information. You keep building a storehouse for when the time comes and you have to pull it out. So it's not that I was trying to make the big painting like the sketch, but the sketch was the source.
Yeah. That's so cool. So cool. And it's something that's life-giving, it sounds like, because the pressure of, oh, I'm painting for such and such a thing is not there. It's just gathering information, and there's a lot of freedom with that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for us to do that, especially it seems now with social media and just the flood of artwork every single day that we run across. It sometimes makes you feel like you're not keeping up with it. Like it seems like there are people out like shooting them out like rapid fire machine guns. And
Yeah.
I just think that when you look within yourself, you have to give yourself time to breathe, because painting is not a run and gun kind of an experience. It's an experience that should be savored over some time. And so I think doing the sketchbook idea, it's like a vacation almost within your work week or whatever, or painting week. And it really just sort of recenters me, you know, it,
Yeah.
it, it, takes me away from all the other, if you pay your bills from painting and you buy your food and pay your bills, you have to make a living out of it somehow. Um, but you have to have this other time where that's not what you're doing, where that's not
Yeah.
what's most important, and that's what I think the sketchbooks do. Just gives you that kind of time.
Yeah. They're really fun to look at. These small sketches you can see, and so are these all kind of from close to where you live?
Yeah, yeah, we just travel around the area. That's the south end island. So Tybee Island has beach on three sides, the marsh on the fourth side. So yeah, we travel around here, up and down um, the coast in Georgia mostly. And it's not a very long coast right here, but within a short drive.
Yeah. Georgia got the short end of the stick, and Florida got a lot of beach.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
But at least Georgia got some. I always feel bad. Like I'll look at a map every once in a while. I think like the Canadians should be sad about Alaska's. Like Alaska comes down the whole coast. Like it comes out so far. It's like all the coast is Alaska, and then there's. I mean, British Columbia still has a lot there, but it's amazing how far Alaska reached down on the coast.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, and the coastline. Well, the good thing about where we live in Georgia, and the good thing about this Savannah area, it's called the Bight. It's called the Georgia Bight, and really they mean because it looks like something came and took a bite out of the continent right there. So
oh,
what it does, and it's a deep trough, so that's why we get 8 to 10 foot tides twice a day, and so it flushes these marshes out constantly. So it's full of it's one of the largest shark breeding grounds in the country, and huge shrimping and fishing industry, of course. But the Bight also keeps us a little bit safer from hurricanes because as they come up, they tend to swing off to the northeast, and because we're farther inland than anywhere else on the coast, so it's
oh
kind of a
wow.
deterrent to coming farther. I mean, they've hit here, but they're less likely to hit here.
That is very interesting. Now, I need to just do something real quick here. I'm going to see if I can. I want to come back and look and see if I have any images or I mean questions and stuff coming up. But the I want to get into this question. How did you get started? Like we're looking at some of your work here, but how did you actually get started in art? You grew up in a military family, moved around. When did that start for you?
Yeah, well, I was lucky. I'll just make it really brief, but I was lucky. And my dad had always been an artist and went in the Air Force because he also liked to fly. So, so we always had art supplies in the house. He was a cartoonist.
Oh,
He carried that on, but he did pastels and oils. So there was always art supplies. My mom also did some. You know, we lived in Norway, so she did some rose modeling and that kind of stuff. So I was lucky as a kid because art supplies weren't a problem, and the idea of doing art wasn't a problem. But however, I wanted to study birds, so I went to school to be an ornithologist. And part of the way through that, I just realized that I had more of an aesthetic interest in birds than a scientific interest because I was illustrating pages and stuff all the time. And so then I decided, well, I want to pursue this bird painting thing. I had discovered a couple of painters. One was a painter from Ithaca, New York, named Louis Fuertes, who had done most of the bird illustration at the turn of the 20th century, and was killed very young in a train wreck, just like Anthony Wyeth with his grandson. But so I went off to art school so I can learn how to be a better artist. Learn the skills, the design, and the color and the drawing, so I could paint birds better. And then I spent 25 years only painting birds and animals. So I did that up until 2000, I guess, 2002 or three. And then I just had enough of the whole marketing platform involved around that. And I was painting more and more outside. Some friends and I had started painting landscapes from life. And so I was doing that more and more, and I was painting bigger landscapes. So I just left the bird painting behind, got into a gallery in Minneapolis, and did really well in about a year and a half. And then we had the first Gulf War, and everything. You were talking earlier about the turn in the economy will winnow out artists. Well, winnowed out galleries and artists pretty
hmm.
quick. But yeah, and since then I've just concentrated on landscape only. But yeah, I was lucky to have parents who were involved in it and saw the value in it instead of trying to make me
Yeah,
not do it.
that makes a big
I feel
difference
really
for sure.
fortunate about that.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, that makes such a huge difference to be
Yeah,
supported and encouraged.
yeah, it sure does.
Hmm.
Um, So the landscape thing, I sort of, I attribute it to um, being moved around all the time. I mean, I went to 8 grade schools and 3 high schools. And I think that the one constant I always had wherever we lived, there was a landscape I could stare at out the window, as we're driving
Yeah,
down the road.
yeah.
And I just think being an outdoors person, I love all the outdoor sports. Hunting and fishing was part of my growing up, and I still fish a lot. And I think that being an outdoors person, the landscape is just the big picture. It's like you can be a bird painter or a squirrel painter or a bug painter or something like that. But the landscape is what they're all dependent upon. And I feel really strongly that painting landscape isn't like just a fun thing that I go out and do. It's we're recorders of our time. And
Hmm.
I think Carlson talked in John Carlson's book on painting. Um, he talks about don't be a tourist painter. Don't,
Hmm.
because he says your own place in the future will be just as important as the old places are to you now. So
Ah, that's
what you're
interesting.
painting right now is just going to be just as important to the people in the future as looking back at the impressionists is to us.
Yeah,
So we're losing landscape fast. We're losing the
yeah.
natural areas fast. So I think anything we do that takes a look at those and gives people an idea of how we feel about it is
Hmm.
very critical to what's going to be seen in the future.
That's really interesting. So I did not know that about your bird painting. That part of your art story. That's quite interesting. So, what would you say, like, if you were to just think of some of the different things that have influenced you, like artists, where have you kind of gotten the most out of the experiences and the people that you've either seen or studied under or things like that? Like, what have been those main influences?
Well, out in the bird world, there were a lot of them, and a lot of them aren't really known too well. I, but the Fuertes was a big hero. There was a Swedish painter named Bruno Lillefors who was a phenomenal painter. A German painter named Wilhelm Kunert, who painted Africa and big, huge paintings of, elephants and all that stuff. But outside the animal world, in about 1990, I went to St. Louis and saw the first show of Soroya's work that had come back to the States. It was like the 90th anniversary of the Hispanic Society murals in New York City.
Mm,
So I went and saw that show, and I've never been the same since. I mean,
really?
and I'd seen a lot of art, a lot of museums. I've never seen a painter who who had such an emotional effect on me. I
Mm,
mean, just massive paintings, beautifully done. And there's just so many stories about that. I've seen a couple shows since then, a couple more shows. So I mean, as far as the painter goes, I used to have all those. I mean, the American Impressionists and the French Impressionists. I tend to lean more towards those kind of painters. But once I saw Sorolla, I never saw artists again who just like turned my screws so tightly as he did.
wow.
Um, I the first show I went to was with a friend of mine from Minnesota, and he had been a Vietnam Combat Artist of the Year. He's a Marine in Vietnam, and he was a tough guy. I mean, he in all ways.
Yeah.
And we walked into the Sorolla show and turned the corner, and the first painting on the wall was Sorolla's painting called. I've seen a couple different titles. It's Sewing the Sail. So it's
Yeah.
all these ladies under the veranda of geraniums, and they're sewing the sail. And we stood there, and my friend, and he's a lot shorter than I was, and we just started bawling. You know,
Really.
we, yeah, and it was just that way through the whole show. Every painting was like, oh my God, how could someone possibly do this? So that
That's
was
that's
spectacular.
crazy. That's
Um,
crazy.
Richard
Wow.
Schmid was a big influence on me, of course, because his books came out when I was in art school, so of course that was big. I tell you, for acrylics, I'll tell you who just blew me away, and I've seen videos of him painting in the past. I didn't even know he worked in acrylic, and that's Charles Movali. I was up in
Hmm.
Cape Ann a few years ago for the Cape Ann Plein Air event. He had passed away, I think, a year or two before that. And they had a show of his work, and it was like 36-inch square paintings, 48-inch square paintings, all this stuff. And I thought, wow, these look like Moalis, and I figured they're all oil paintings. But when I went up, because that's when I thought he painted it, when I went up and looked at the tags, they were all acrylics. And
Really?
I was like, what the? And so his wife came into the show at one point, and so I started talking to her, and I asked her about it. And she said, yeah, he was busting his butt for a show a number of years ago. And he was getting frustrated. He was so far behind. She said, well, why don't you try my acrylics? And he never looked back. And if you
That's
looked at
hilarious.
them, you wouldn't know that. I mean, they have, whatever the guy, his bravura style, but they're just painted. There's nothing, there's nothing weak, and there's very bold and very brash, just like he painted otherwise.
Now, who
So
who was that? I feel like I need to look. Charles
yeah, look him
Mawali.
up. Charles Movali was, I think he had like 4 degrees in literature or something like that. But he wrote the Group A books. So he knew Emile Group A, and his father knew all those painters from the Cape Ann area. So he wrote the books about Group A, and
Oh,
he wrote a ton of articles for American Artist Magazine back when it was being published. Um, so
wow.
yeah, it's Movali,
Yeah, I
Movali is his
see them. I
last
mean, they're
name.
beautiful, beautiful paintings. And you're saying a lot like at some point he basically transitioned. So I wouldn't know necessarily which ones are acrylic by looking online, but probably a good portion of them are
Well,
actually
go
acrylics.
to go to the if you look up the Cape Ann Museum, they
Okay.
have, I think they have the last show that he had still up, or they have links to his shows. But if you search Charles Movali, there's, I tell you, a really good gallery that's selling his work is Gallery Montanaro up in Cape Ann. Um,
Hmm.
there's there's an artist up there who also has a gallery, and he deals Movalis that come through. But yeah, you may not know, which is what is so beautiful about it. It didn't matter to him. He didn't have any
Yeah.
preconceptions about what it should be or couldn't be or anything like
Yeah.
that. He just got out and painted with it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so, but
one of the things, Mark, that I've always said, and I'll take a minute just to say it because I feel like this is kind of true. If you think about the hundreds of years that artists have been learning in oils and been trained by other artists in oils, so you have a master who trains their students, and then some of those people become masters, and then they train more students. And if you have all of that lineage in a way in oils, and then you say, well, 70 years ago, somebody invented acrylics, and you just don't have that same kind of history where people
right.
are being trained and all that. And I think that that's a big thing that happens is, I've talked to so many people who have stories like you. They had kind of health issues that forced them to do something with acrylic,
Mm-hmm.
but then they were already a very proficient artist, and so the transition was really quite, it wasn't necessarily totally easy at first, but the transition wasn't learning how to be a good artist, it was just learning
Right.
how to use the medium, and so it was relatively quick, and they're very good. And um and 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 I think that if there were more, you know, really highly skilled artists that just for whatever reason chose to use acrylics, I think you would lose, because like you're saying with Charles Movali, I mean, I think that you just see at some point you're just like, it doesn't matter what the medium is. This is a
Yeah.
beautiful painting that I'm looking at there.
Well, I think to me, and I don't know what y'all think about this, but something that I think I'm wondering about, something has happened with acrylic. Because when I started using acrylic in art school, I think all we had was Liquitex and permanent pigments. We
Mm,
ended up buying Liquitex. But there was such a nasty value shift when the paint dried that it was
mm,
very discouraging. And and so this was my issue for years with it. So I was an oil painter, And someone told me once, they said, well, your oil paint shifts value too. You just don't see it because it dries so slow. That may
Hmm.
be, but you know, um, but I think what I'm wondering if what's happened the more that you use it, because I've talked to acrylic painters who've never worked in anything but, and they've said that they've never noticed a value shift. So I'm wondering if it's that the paints are getting better, like golden open paints. When I first used those, I was shocked because there was no value shift. And now I
Yeah.
don't see the value shift in the heavy body, which are the ones I prefer. And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is my eye getting used to it? You know, is
Yeah.
or are they actually making them so that they don't shift value as much? I don't know.
That's a very
Uh,
good question, and I don't know the answer, but I do know that I was watching one artist a while ago, and he mentioned that Windsor and Newton they have a clear base that basically got rid of the color shift in what they do. So I wouldn't doubt if that's something that for sure the manufacturers are constantly probably
yeah,
working on, right? How can we make it better so that this doesn't happen? Um,
yeah,
but
I
yeah,
think you're right. I
it's a
think
funny thing too, though, because I think that I'm so used to it that I don't notice it, and but I'll talk to somebody who's like either transitioning, and they'll ask those questions. How do I deal with this? And I think, well, shoot, I haven't thought about that for a long time because I don't even notice it anymore.
yeah,
But I
I'm sure
think,
that if you, as long as you've
yeah,
painted with it, you're compensating automatically if it does happen.
I think that
It's
that's part of it. Yeah. So tell us, we're looking here at your setup here. So let's hear a little bit about this. Can you explain what we're looking at?
sure. Yeah. Well, let me go back a little bit. So I when really started working more with acrylic, I went and I got the golden open because I thought, well, I've got to have an acrylic that doesn't dry as fast because I'm just that kind of dull brain. I need something I can keep working with. And so I started using those for a while, but they just didn't have the kind of punch. I'm sorry, that I wanted. So I started using the heavy bodies, and like I learned to work on a wet palette. Like a butcher tray. You're gonna go study with William Hook. We went to the same school, so we had to use a butcher tray with paper towels folded in wet. Squirt the color out on that. But I kept getting weaker mixtures, like weaker strokes. I couldn't get the kind of power to the paint stroke that I wanted. So I started using the Stay Wet palette without the sponge and paper. And I just put one of those gray matter 12 by 16 palette pads in there. And so I work on that dry palette now. And I finally got the kind of sort of alla prima impasto kind of look that I wanted to the paint. If I put them on a Stay Wet palette, the paint just keeps getting weaker and weaker because it soaks up that moisture, which
Yeah.
is good if you're working on a long-term project or something, I guess. But I just prefer the dry palette. So this is just a tool chest like you get from a hardware store with a 1/4 inch piece of tempered glass on it. And I just mix on there. And I tried paper, shelf butcher paper, and I tried palettes and other stuff. This is just so simple. You can just spray it and stuff peels right off.
Yeah.
So it's easy to clean. Um, I guess the ticket for me was not having to have wet paint all the time. So I've found ways to work the painting so that if I need areas to be wet for transitions, I just keep working them until I get that transition, then move on.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
um, it. But yeah, so that's what that is. And I went from tubes because I realized how much more I was spending, and started buying tubs. And as soon as I'd like to get bigger tubs, but I need more space. So
Yeah.
I think that's important to have enough. Well, I can't even say that because there's so many ways to work with it. You can work with it. I'm watching people on Instagram who work with it like watercolor in layers, and it's gorgeous, or like egg tempera, or like Charles Mavali. I mean, there's just the whole range of ways to work with it. But if you're working on a prima like this, or in an impasto kind of a way, I like just mixing it on something dry, cleaning it off, mixing more.
What's cool about it is I think that, you have found something that works for you, right? And I think that that's one thing that I always try to encourage people in is it's going to be different. Like we all probably will prefer something slightly different. Like, somebody
Yeah.
likes this kind of easel, or somebody wants to paint standing up, somebody wants to paint sitting down, somebody wants to paint with their thing totally horizontal, flat. And it doesn't matter. What really matters is finding, trying things and seeing what works. And I think it's cool because I've never done this really. I've never painted. I do have a glass palette, but not as big as this. And it's interesting because I mean, when I see this, I go, huh, I wonder what that'd be like, and maybe for somebody who's watching, they'll try this, and that will be something that they really love because something you said resonated with them, and they'll try this, and this will be the solution for a problem that they're having that they didn't know that they're having.
Yeah. Well, I've discovered things like that too. Like when I go in the field, I buy these 7-day, extra large size 7-day pill containers. So it's got Sunday through Saturday on. And so when I go in the field, I pre-fill those up and then put those in a Ziploc bag. Now I've also discovered that Ziploc bag with a wet paper towel is great to put my brushes in because they're not going to get clean in the field, so they don't dry out before I get home. And so
Yeah.
I take that out, and then I use my regular open it up and put it on a tripod, kind of a painting palette. And then I can set those pill containers on there and just pull paint right out of those and mix on the palette dry. And
Yeah.
and then another thing I discovered was because of fishing, they make these waterproof, watertight tackle containers. They're about 1.5 inches high, maybe 11 by 12 or 11 by 14. And they have a rubber seal going around the lid. And it's with permanent divisions inside. So you can fill those up with paint and they never dry. I mean, you can keep that when you seal it up, it's airtight,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to keep the paint wet. I saw someone asking how do you keep the paint wet, and there's just so many unique little things you can do to put the paint in. Of course,
Yeah.
a mister bottle is important, a little spray mister.
Yeah, for sure. Marsha Burt uses something like that tackle box. I don't know if you know Marsha Burt, but
Oh yeah. She uses like a open up thing with trays, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very interesting. There's so many different solutions. And guys, just so you know, I will try to go back through and look at some questions. But I've got a few questions that I'm still working through myself for Mark.
There are a lot of great questions. I'm seeing them come through here.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I'm because of the way that I'm doing this, I have to. I'm not on my normal setup, and I can't see all the questions as they're coming in. So I'm gonna have to scroll back through. So if you have a question that you asked already, you might wait and later put it in there again, and I'll be able to see it. But this is a question that I really love asking because, well, there's two, um, but what was your, I don't know how you would describe your own work, but how did you discover your artistic voice, like how you like to express yourself in art?
Um, I think it's from just painting my butt off.
Hmm.
And I mean that in all seriousness because in about mid 2000s, like 2004 or five. Now I've been painting since 19, way too back, 80 something. Um, but about that time, I started. I still wasn't quite computerized, so I made a big notebook, loose leaf binder thing, and I printed out this form, and I would record every painting, give it a little number, where it went, size, all that. Well, I quit doing that in about 2007 or eight. I had like 780 pages in there already in just a few
Wow.
years. So and I know that during that time period, I was painting so much that I started to see my paintings when I'd look at the subject. Before that, I have culled a lot of paintings because of all the moving I've done. I had some really bad paintings that are in various dumpsters and things around the country. But because I was looking, you keep looking, you keep trying, you have a lot of more failures than you have successes. But at some point during that time, I remember looking at this one spot. I would drive by it every single day, and I suddenly started, in different times of year, I suddenly started seeing um, paintings at that spot. And it was very simple, just a little tree and some stuff. And I realized, oh, okay, I have to hold on to that, because that's how you look at the landscape as a painting, not as the natural history part of it. And I come from a natural history background, so that was difficult for me to get to that point, because I want to know all the stuff, that's out
Hmm.
there. It's kind of, but yeah, so it's from that constant going out and not wanting to replicate it, but looking for those things that are interesting to you about it, and then trying to put down that interest on your canvas or whatever, so that you're no longer replicating things, even though it may look replicated, but you're actually showing more than what was there if you had just done a direct replication.
Hmm. You know
I
what
think
that
that's it.
makes me? Have you ever heard of the when you're learning a new language, they say when you dream in the other language, that's when you're fluent. That's
uh,
what that makes me think of.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense, because you all of a sudden your whole world opens up in terms of paintings. Like, I'm a big fan of, for some reason, around the turn of the 20th century, painters had the right mindset. Henri, Charles Hawthorne, John Carlson, those, and all the other painters who didn't write books, but they had the right idea about what painting was. And I think it's primarily because they hadn't been inundated with the camera yet, with photographs. So they
Hmm.
knew that when you go outside, there's no way in the world that you're going to be able to paint everything that you just saw standing out there. And they didn't have photos in common use to back it up. So they had to learn how to boil it down to the essence and get more in touch with what it was they wanted to say about the landscape versus doing the photographic replication, because that wasn't really prominent in their lingo yet. That wasn't
Hmm.
something they had to worry about. So yeah, it's you just become so familiar that, and familiar with your tools. Like, this is the challenge switching mediums, like I've been doing. I have to get familiar with the tools. Otherwise, you spend all your time banging yourself up against the head with the dried up acrylic brush. And
Hmm.
you have to get used to your tools so that that's second nature, and that takes time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The second question that I think is really interesting and can be quite helpful for people who are facing their own is what have been some of your challenges in art or in your career or however you want to take that, and then what have you done to overcome those challenges?
Well, probably like a lot of people, as a painter, your biggest worry is not having time to paint. And if you're working, if you have children, or other obligations, that's like the most difficult thing for me. I think was the most difficult thing to try to balance and try to understand how I can still do this and still paint. When I was younger, I went for a while, um, because I would get up and do the kid thing and bus driver and all that. So I go to bed kind of early and get up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, then work till they got up, just so I could get the hours in. Because
Mm.
when you're young or you're learning, you know that you have to put in a certain amount of time in order to get yourself where you want to go. And this is not anybody else's saying you have to do this. I think this is what you put on yourself, you
Mm.
know, or you want to paint as much as you possibly can. So finding ways to work around all the other things that go on every single day. And I would say, I just, I'd be I just watched, Doug Swinton, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just watched the thing he did this morning. He had a pile of laundry on the table. And he was talking about, why you can't paint. And he said, push the laundry away. And he just threw the laundry off the side of the table. And that's kind of true. Uh, art is a jealous mistress, and you need to give it the time. And a lot of times you let other people and other things get in the way of you being able to do it. And I guess you just have to decide whether or not you want to go ahead and push your way through that and
Yeah.
stick to it and not
Yeah.
stop. Not stopping is a big thing as you go through your painting time, your painting life, um, because there are so many things that can cause you to back away from it, give it up. I mean, how many times you guys been out painting and someone says, "Oh, I used to paint, you know, then I did this." Well, I
Yeah.
just decided early on I wasn't going to be that. I wasn't going to
Mm.
wake up one day and say, "Well, I used to paint."
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. That's
it's
so
a you have
interesting.
what's that?
Oh no, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's I think it's just everybody deals with it. Everybody painting, no matter how supportive your loved ones, your parents, or whoever is, unless you're another artist, most people look at painting as a holiday. They think it's a fun job. And you get asked out painting all the time. Oh, you're having so much fun. That was after you just like threw one in the marsh, and
Yeah.
cussed and swore and slapping bugs and
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, it's kind of this is a little bit of a stretch of an analogy, but I've been in different fields before, like where so I used to work for an organization called Young Life, and
oh yeah, I
it's
know.
kind of the same, like where the guy that was in charge, he would say, like, there was all these kids that they'd graduate and they'd be like, I want to work for Young Life, and he would always tell them, he'd say, look, if you can go and be happy doing anything else in the world, go and do it. But like, only if you're like, this is the only thing that I can do, like, okay, then let's talk. But I feel like it's kind of like that with art, is like, there's this idea that, oh, I want to be an artist, like, this is my dream, this is my goal, and like, but like, it's not always as romantic as somebody would think. I mean, like, you got all these stories of people going crazy in the past, cutting off their ear, and all that, and most of those artists weren't very wealthy, or they died in poverty, they went through seasons and all this stuff, and it's like,
Yeah,
hey, go into it knowing that it's not just, if you're trying to make your career out of it, it's not just a cakewalk, and it's not the romantic kind of thing. But what I find too is that a lot of people have done what you said. They loved art, they loved painting growing up, they loved drawing, they were really passionate about it, and they did choose the other, maybe for a lot of good reasons, right? And like, honestly, like, the world probably can't support as many people who would want to be artists, I don't
yeah,
know. but
that's true.
but they're
Well,
coming back to it, right? And so they're coming back, maybe after a career in something else, or after their kids, graduated, or whatever it is. What would you say to somebody who's coming back to it? Would you give them the same advice, like, hey, like, at this point, it's stick with it, like, just go for it? What would you say to somebody who's kind of coming back?
yeah, I think there's a bit of a dilemma there because on one hand, if you're someone who's watching this is very young, you know, just heading off to art school or something, that's a totally different situation. You'll have to decide at some point where that's going to take you and how much of a part of your life that's going to be. If you're someone who's coming back to it or who wants to be an artist but might have to give something up in order to do it, you'll just have to decide if you want to give it up because being an artist means giving up a lot of things. I think probably the best explanation I ever heard was an artist. I heard an interview with an artist out west, and he's in all kinds of museums. He's in museums in New York and London, and he's never made a living. He's never made a living from his artwork, and he teaches out in California somewhere. And he said, I tell my students, don't ever put yourself in the position of having to make a living from this. He said, when you're born, your parents don't pay extra for you to be an artist. It's not something that you pick and choose. You either will be of that mentality or you won't be. And like you said, if you can't get over the hurdles, then you probably won't be. And every artist has a different story and different lineup of hurdles that they've had to cross over and get around and under and everything else in order to be sitting around talking to you about being an artist. I don't know. Maybe there's some people out there who, well, I see some young artists now who I think they're coming out of the chute. They're gone already. They're ready to go. They're already there, but they probably aren't either. I mean, it all looks very different on the social media or in a magazine or whatever you're looking at and reading about them. I think you got to love it. You've got to love painting. I would say pay attention to that more than you pay attention to. And don't get me wrong, marketing is how you sell paintings, but pay attention and learning to be a better painter. Because you can enjoy it all the way along, and the more you do it, the more you find out that you want to do it better. Right? It's that old story. The artist doesn't want to pass away because they haven't learned how to paint yet, and they're a master. And I think that's the most important thing. I think if your mind is put in the place of exploring, discovering, trying new things, learning about what you're doing, if you decide that there's something about it that you want to go try to make money from, that'll come. But more importantly, you need to be really accomplished where you're at with what you're doing. You don't need to be Soroya. We're never going to be Soroya. You need to be the best as who you are, but you need to be concentrating on that and not I think there's a little bit too much be an artist, make a sale kind of thing going on right now. I think becoming better artists would be smarter.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. I feel like I'm just gonna go back here and guys, if you have, we're gonna take a few minutes here. I'm gonna go through and make some notes on questions. So if you have a question still, I just type it in the chat and I'll try to grab it here. But like Rachel says, I'm a stay-at-home mom, homeschool mom, and artist. People think I do nothing all day. I love it.
I'm sorry. That's so rude.
Yeah.
I worked out of my house for a long time, and so at the time I was married, and my ex-wife had a business, and so they thought I did nothing all day too. It's like it goes along with it.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, even now they think we do nothing all day.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, here's a question from Zirka. Marc, you have had such a vast spectrum of art experience. What are you still dreaming of doing?
Oh, art-wise?
Anything.
Catching a 24-inch redfish, that'd be one.
What'd you say?
Catching a 24-inch redfish.
Oh.
I don't. I think as far as painting goes, and I keep working towards this. I just haven't completely done. I want to be outside painting large paintings from life, and I keep letting all those things we were just talking about get in my way, like whether it's weather or whatever else is going on. But I think for me, that's a goal, is just to be more accurate because I'm out in front of it more. And if that means big paintings or whatever.
That's awesome. I like that goal. Okay, Lisa says, I'm going to try out a dry palette and just remix. And do you have trouble mixing enough color that doesn't dry out? How do you deal with that kind of?
Oh, well, you will. What I did was I started limiting my palette somewhat. So I use fewer colors now than I used to, which means I can go back to a color mixture faster. So if I had 15, 16 pigments out there, colors out there like I used to have, trying to find that same mixture again would be much harder. Now I have, I don't know, what was on the palette, 7 or 8, and I don't use all those, but I think I've noticed outside, so I take those 7-day pill things, so I've got 7 plus another one with about 3 or 4 colors in it, so 8 to 10 colors. But yeah, you're gonna have to build that memory of the mixing and just keep mixing that color, or another thing I'll do is work an area. If it's that critical, I'll just work that area until I get it kind of where I want it to be, so that
Yeah.
if it all dries and I can never mix that color again, at least it's done or close to it. But the
Yeah.
other thing is it's acrylic, I mean, you need to learn, you know, scumbling and dragging and, mixing color that's close and just overlaying color. That's what I love about acrylic, is that it gives you that chance to immediately overlay something, almost immediately, over the
Yeah.
top of another color. Um, I don't use a lot of mediums, but sometimes glazes help. If I get a little bit, if I want to shift it a little bit, I'll do that.
That's cool. Yeah. Again, you're saying kind of figuring out how to use the medium for what it is. So here's another one. Mark, do you start with a ground color and maybe talk a little bit about if you use different colors, like why you might choose the color that you paint on?
Um, yeah, I am more because of things like those sketchbooks and pastel. Because in pastel, I always used a gray paper, and the sketchbooks have a gray background. So I find it, I'm slow, but it took me a while to realize that's a really nice surface to start on. I'm not, I am slow, but not that slow. But when I saw the Soroya show, he had done a lot of paintings, and they used to prime have their flake white tinted with ivory black and maybe a little red. So they started a lot on kind of a light middle gray tone. So I've
Really?
done that for a long time with oil paints, and it works great with acrylics, especially outside, because if you're just putting notes of color down and you've got spaces showing, it doesn't look like this glaring hard spot of the white canvas. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like a neutral. And when I was painting more with oil paints, I always carried acrylics in my bag, because I decided I would use acrylic grounds, and that way I could tone the acrylic grounds for the oil paints according to what's in front of me, not just orange one day and purple the next day. And that way I had a dry ground to paint on with oil paint. So I better than the white surface for sure is some sort of color on there, but I like a neutral, a brown and a blue of some sort, raw
I'm totally
sienna.
with you. I actually like kind of gray. Gray's a great color, I think, for plein air painting because you can go kind of any direction on it.
Yeah.
But something like that, I like that too.
Well, it
Um,
shows the color off right away too. So
yeah.
it's so neutral that the color pops right away.
So, do you ever paint acrylic underneath an oil?
Yeah. Um, if I get an acrylic to the point where I'm like, ah, you know, I'm frustrated with it or whatever, I might switch it over to oil. Usually I'm doing that on a panel, like a cradle panel. Um, the only time I'll do it on a canvas, just because of the flexing of the canvas, if there's ever going to be adhesion issues, a stretched canvas or stretched linen will cause those cracking problems, and the adhesion issue. So I might use a wash of acrylic just to block something in, very light, no body to it at all, and then paint over that with oil if I plan that from the beginning. But on boards, I'll paint a painting a ways along, and if I decide that there's just transitions and things that I'll feel more comfortable being able to achieve with oil paint, then I'll move over to the oil paint. But I'm getting away from that too, because I'm finding I get about 2 hours into that and I go, damn it, I wish I would have not. I wish I would have left it acrylic. Now,
Uh,
because there were things I could have done with the acrylic, but I just gave up too easy.
yeah, interesting.
I used to say for me, acrylic is a workout. It Acrylic is so much harder work, I think, than oil painting. Oil painting is kind
Really?
of like relaxing. Well, because you're keeping ahead of that wetness, that wet dry thing. Um, I find it much more of a workout, but more exciting too at the same time.
That's interesting. What the colors that you showed? I'm gonna see if I could show it again. The colors that you showed um, on your tool chest.
Uh huh.
Are they the colors that you um, might limit yourself to in the I mean
Yeah,
just so
yeah,
can
they
you see
are.
them?
What I can see them. Yeah,
Okay.
I have added cad yellow um, cad yellow light, and I think I've got the alizarin there. So I think I added cad yellow light, and occasionally I pull out cobalt blue. What's out there is ultramarine.
Okay.
Um, well, that's something I was going to say is the big one for me has been, of all colors, which I never really use in oil paint, is raw umber. The raw umber acrylic is just spectacular for like blocking things in and then going over the top of that with the finished color. So I use the
Mm.
raw umber a lot for drawing things out, even doing tonal areas of a preliminary in a painting. Um,
So what colors
and
are
also I
these?
find it. What's
Oh,
that?
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the raw umber is also, I'm using that a lot for mixing into my greens and, with my yellows and making nice grays. So it just surprised me because it's a much cleaner color in acrylic than it is in oil paint.
Oh,
I don't know why
interesting.
that is.
So you have titanium white, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I've got titanium white, yellow oxide. Uh, I use Utrecht's burnt sienna. It's a bit more transparent, a little bit richer burnt sienna that I find than Goldens.
Okay.
Um, then the next one is, I think that is raw umber,
Okay.
and the next one to that is alizarin crimson hue,
Okay.
and then ultramarine blue, and then I've got ivory black, and then that little one is a cad red. It's that oh so flat stuff. I hadn't purchased a cad red yet in the tub, so it's that oh so flat matte paint that Golden makes, which
Okay.
it's kind of runny, like
Okay,
it's real
gotcha.
fluid. But so since then, and there's also a cad lemon yellow hiding back there. So since then, I've bought a tub of both cad red and cad lemon yellow.
Okay.
But that's where using just sort of those 6, 7, 8 colors to me has been, makes it able for me to get back to a color mixture faster.
Oh
I can
yeah.
tell.
Well, I am a huge fan. I never really done it before teaching acrylic university, but I'm a huge fan of limited palette. So simplifies everything.
Yeah. So you use a limited one too?
Yeah, yeah. I basically go out with 7 colors. Like the other day, I went out and I have a similar kind of. It's a bead box that I found at. Well, I saw John Poon using it. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lockable bead box, but it's kind of like a pill box. It's just I think it's might have a little bit bigger wells in it, um, but it's great. And yeah, I just fill that up with pretty similar colors to what you have. I mean, I have the three primaries. I have burnt sienna, and I had Naples yellow and titanium white, but that was kind of like all I had. I just wanted a more neutral yellow and a brown that I could mix with the blue to create a dark. So
Yeah. Yeah. I carry out, like, I have a little uh, art box thing or whatever you call them. So I carry out. I love that Naples yellow too. That golden Naples yellow. That's a great color. So I carry those out, and if I need them, I use them. But I like that staying a little more neutral with the color. I think someone asked earlier about acrylics reputation or whatever, and I think that's something. I think that's something that earlier that you saw with acrylic is that there was just a lot more color being used that wasn't used well,
yeah,
so because people would try acrylic before they bought oil paints for some reason, so
yeah.
they didn't take it seriously.
And I
And
also think that it dries so fast you couldn't mix it, and if you didn't have a way of mixing your colors, it's just like color, color, color. You know.
yeah. Oh, there's so many painters, you guys probably follow them too, especially for some reason in Great Britain, who are doing very beautiful kind of abstracted landscapes, in acrylic, sketchbooks, and sitting out on those really rough, stormy coasts and things. I mean, I get a lot of inspiration out of that kind of painting. It's not very representational, but the way they use the acrylic and the layering and the scumbling, and they're using different media in with it, and just it's really exciting. It's a lot more exciting than oil paint.
Yeah. Now here's one. Do you use a palette knife for your tiny grass brush strokes on the foreground of some of those?
Sometimes, even more than that, I should have brought all this stuff over here with me. I use, you buy these spatulas, you get 5 for $1, and they're red, yellow, blue, green, stuff like that. And they have a silicone blade. You can buy them, for scraping out the pie pan or whatever.
I
Um,
don't know.
let me, can I grab one?
Yeah, grab one. Sure.
Hold on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say something real quick, everybody. We're going to be wrapping up here relatively quick, but I want to say I am coming in from Oregon because our daughter has a gymnastics meet. And so I'm actually in our hotel room while the gymnastics meet is happening. But I was able to watch a little bit of it before it got started. But isn't this great to be able to listen to Mark and get some of his secrets? This is like
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, what do you got there for us?
So these are the spatula
Oh,
blades.
gotcha.
They come a stick, and you just pull the stick out. So I cut them
Yeah.
up into different shapes, sizes. And they're like, you can buy those silicone rubber scrapers and things, but these are really flexible. So,
Yeah.
they're really soft, really flexible. So for like grasses and things, I'll use an edge of these. You
Oh,
can draw with them and put it down.
yeah.
Then you come up into different sizes, so you have different tools to use.
That's
But,
awesome.
but they're really cheap. Like I said, like $1 for 5 or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, totally. I love it. Lisa says that she sees paintings in her head when she's driving around and starts mapping in her brain how she would paint that. But
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah,
and she
that's
said too
exactly
she
it.
needs to paint her butt off like you. I think that's a good saying for people. Paint your butt off.
There you go.
Here's a question. Do you finish one painting before starting another, or do you ever have multiple paintings going on?
hmm I do now. I never ever did that until maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I always just put a painting up, bust my head all the way through it until it was done or trashed. Um, but now I see the value in taking paintings off the easel, putting them to side, letting that one out of your head, bringing up something else, refreshing yourself by working on it, and then coming back to that. A lot of times you come back to it and you go, well, all the problems I thought I had with it really weren't problems. They were problems because I was staring at it for so long that everything just kept, tumbling over in front of me.
Yeah,
So, or you see more clearly what you need to do to it. And I think that's a really valuable thing to do, is to put them aside, then bring them
yeah,
out another time.
totally agree. Do you ever have your pages stick in your sketchbook, or how do you avoid that?
Um, no, with the heavy body, I don't. I used to use the golden open, and I couldn't do it. You can't do that because they stay wet for so long. But with the heavy body, I'll kind of leave it a little bit loose. I don't, flatten out tight and stick it in my bag right away. But they're pretty thin, and they're pretty dry by the time I decide to put it away. Um, I love them for that reason. I've even had gouache stick in my sketchbook more than the acrylic does. So,
Oh,
um,
really?
and I don't treat the paper. It's archival paper. That's acid-free paper. So I just paint right on that tan or that gray. I prefer the gray myself, but um, yeah. So it's just so simple. That's the other thing about it. I keep trying to winnow down the number of things I take out in the field, and like I made these little, those little folding sketch things that James Gurney made so popular. So I made those for us, and with a rubber water cup and just a little bag. Just the simpler you can make it, the more you'll go
Yeah,
do it. The
totally.
easier it is to go do it, the more you will.
Totally agree. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see about your sketchbook idea because I've never found something. I've never really tried too hard, but I've never had something really portable, really easy besides my normal like big plein air stuff, which like you're saying, I mean, if you had something that you could just pop in, take with you when you're going somewhere, I mean, that sounds pretty
Yeah.
awesome. And it's easy to do
You
it.
want? Oh, I think it's in the car. I was going to say I could have shown you that, but I think I put them in the car. Well, I can send you, like links to like the sketchbook that I use and all that kind of stuff if you want to, so you can
Sure,
pass
that'd
it
be
on later.
fun. Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Um, Lots of people super thankful for all the gold nuggets that you're giving everybody. So
Oh,
it's really
good.
fun. Yeah. Let me see. Did we talk about how long it takes for Mark to complete one of these beautiful field sketches? Yeah. What are you looking at there?
Um, I mean, they're pretty quick, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour most of the time, but they're they're pretty broadly painted. There's which is the purpose um, of them. But yeah, I mean they're pretty quick. So if I go out for a couple hours, I always hope to do two or three of them at least. But they're only this big.
And
So
you're capturing quite a bit of information, looking in a few different directions or something like that. And
well, and
there's
I'm
somebody.
looking for light. I'm looking for the atmosphere of the light. I'm looking for the color, atmosphere of the color.
Hmm,
So I'm not identifying plants with them for
yeah.
sure. And also, what I'm finding out is that I'm playing with it. So I'm pushing the way I normally do things a little bit farther in them. And I haven't exactly figured out how to do that on a big painting in the same way because there's something so beautiful about the slickness of the paper and the way the paint grabs. And, there's all that stuff that goes on in the sketchbook that you get out a big panel and it just doesn't work the same way. But
Yeah. Well, Kim wants to know if you ever go to Ontario to do workshops.
uh, not lately. I did. I did one with Doug Swinton up in Alberta
Oh, did
a
you?
couple years ago. Yeah.
Up
So
in Calgary?
yeah, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. He came to the when I did the fall color week, he came and brought supplies because so many people had flown there and they couldn't get their oil thinners and all the stuff. So he brought up
Oh,
supplies from Calgary, and
oh,
he's a
nice.
he's a good guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, just a couple more questions here, and we'll call it good. But Shannon asked, how long does a painting take you on average? And do you have kind of like an idea of how many you might be painting in a month or a year?
Um, I'm really not that organized. I should be, but well, for instance, I have a show at the same gallery that part of it's in April, then part of it's in June, and I need about six paintings for April. I need about 20 to 25 paintings for June. So, but at the same time, I need about six paintings for a show in Maine in June. So that's kind of how many paintings I'll be doing between now and then.
Yeah.
But I sometime, I mean, it depends on the size, depends on the complexity. I mean, most paintings are total like 3 or 4 days, 5 days. Maybe setting them aside, pulling them out another day or something
Yeah.
like that. But definitely depends on size and
Yeah.
complexity.
Yeah.
The big ones take longer because you just need to let them sit, and there's just more territory to cover. So,
So this is not a question I see, but it just dawned on me. What kind of brushes, like when you're painting in acrylics, how big are your brushes and what kind of brushes are you using? Flats, like rounds? What are you using?
I've really grown to love those Princeton Catalyst
Okay.
brushes. Want me to grab one?
We've got them. That's what I
Okay.
use, and so they'll be
Yeah,
pretty familiar with them.
I love those, and I thought I would want like the bright, but I mean the a filbert or something like that. But I'm finding out I just like the short flats, the
Okay.
brights.
Yeah.
Yeah. because they really push paint around, and they're the only one of those synthetic brushes to me that's got enough strength to really push paint around. At the same
Yeah.
time, if you get the longer flats or the longer filbers that they make, they're very sensitive. You know, you can really load paint on with them. I
Yeah.
still use a lot of just I buy Blick or Utrecht white sable, and I think the one that I buy, it's got kind of a natural wood handle, and it's a mix. There is some synthetic in there too, so they don't
Okay.
get all swollen up, and so it's white sable and a synthetic white sable, so they don't get all bloated in the water. Um,
Okay.
but I will say the other thing for me, what I've learned about acrylic, I stay away from water as much as possible. Like I if I don't have to, I don't want my brush wet, because I
Hmm.
discovered that the wetter the paint gets, the thinner it gets, the more that value shift happens, and the less power of the paint happens. So if I need to wet the paint down at all, I use their fluid matte medium, instead of water. So I'll squirt some of that out. But I prefer just to use the paint because
Yeah.
the paint, excuse me, compared to oil paint, the paint is so malleable. You can push it so easily compared to oil paint. Oil paint, you have to manipulate it with a medium or something to get it move around like that. So
Yeah.
I try to stay out of the water, and the natural bristle brushes work fine in that case. I mean, you have to wash them eventually, um, but the catalysts are my go-to,
Yeah.
or maybe little
That's,
watercolor brushes or something like that. But
yeah. Well, Mark, I just want to say for all of us, thank you for taking time to hang out with us and share all your different tips and experiences and your journey. Um, there's a I know, guys, let's just show them a bit of appreciation. We're going to be signing off here, but why don't you just shout it out in the chat right now, and we'll be able to
well,
see all this stuff, because I know that
thank
there's.
you. I've really enjoyed it, and I mean, I'm seeing all kinds of great questions and things that it'd be fun to be able to get to. But it's been wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, no, it's been our pleasure, and I know that a lot of people are already saying, like, I'm gonna come back to this and watch it again because there's so many good tips and things like that. But we really do appreciate you taking time. And for all you Acrylic University friends, you are loved and believed in. Go paint your hearts out. Go paint your butts off, as Mark says. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for looking in, you guys.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Jed.
Mark.